The air in the bridal suite smelled of expensive lilies and the salt from the Charleston coast. I remember looking at my reflection in the floor-length mirror, my hands trembling as I tried to unhook the 62 silk buttons lining the back of my gown. My fingers felt clumsy, thick with the weight of the 5-carat diamond Mark had slid onto my finger just 3 hours ago. We were supposed to be flying to Bora Bora in the morning. We were supposed to be starting our life. The door clicked open. I didn't turn around, thinking it was Mark coming to help me with the dress. I expected his hands on my shoulders, the familiar scent of his sandalwood cologne, and the warmth of his breath against my neck. "Mark, thank God," I said, my voice muffled by the layers of lace. "I'm stuck. This corset is actually bruising my ribs." "I brought someone to help you, Claire," Mark's voice said. It wasn't his usual tone. It wasn't the voice of the man who had cried during his vows, or the man who had toasted my parents for raising the woman of his dreams. It was flat, clinical. I turned around, the heavy train of my dress swirling around my feet like a white tide. Mark was standing by the mahogany sideboard, pouring a glass of the vintage bourbon my father had gifted him. Beside him stood a woman. She wasn't a stranger. It was Elena, Mark's executive assistant, the woman he had told me was like a sister to him for the last 3 years. She was still wearing the navy silk bridesmaid dress I had paid for, but her hair, which had been in a tight bun during the ceremony, was down now, spilling over her shoulders in dark, messy waves. "Mark?" I whispered. The silence in the room was so heavy I could hear the hum of the air conditioner. Mark took a slow sip of his drink, then looked at me. He smiled. It wasn't a smile of affection. It was the smile of a man who had just finished a difficult business negotiation and knew he had won. "Elena is going to be staying with us tonight, Claire," Mark's voice said. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Elena's ear. The intimacy of the gesture felt like a physical blow to my chest. "Elena is going to be staying with us tonight," he said. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Elena's ear. The intimacy of the gesture felt like a physical blow to my chest. "Elena is going to be staying with us tonight," he said. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Elena's ear. The intimacy of the gesture felt like a physical blow to my chest. "And moving forward, we talked about this, Claire. Well, I hinted at it. I need variety. I need loyalty. And Elena provides the things you lack." I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Elena, expecting to see shame, but her eyes were cold, fixed on the diamond on my hand. "The house in Kiowa," Elena said, her voice soft but sharp. "Mark said I could have the west wing for my studio. Since you're so busy with your charity boards, you won't even notice I'm there." The room began to tilt. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment confession. This was a blueprint. My mind raced back through the last year, the late nights at the office, the weekend trips to scout locations for his firm, and the way Elena always knew his coffee order better than I did. I had been the perfect supportive fiancé while they were architecturalizing my replacement inside my own marriage. "You're joking," I said, my voice cracking. "Mark, tell me this is some sick wedding night prank." Mark walked towards me. He stopped just inches away, the smell of bourbon and arrogance radiating off him. He reached out and touched my cheek with his thumb. "I'm not joking, Claire. I love the image we project. You're the perfect wife for a man in my position. Your father's connections got me into the country club, and your social standing keeps our names in the right circles. But behind closed doors, I do what I want. Elena stays, you stay. That's the deal." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm whisper. "And don't even think about a scene. Your parents are downstairs in the ballroom with 300 of the most influential people in South Carolina. Do you really want to walk down there and tell them your marriage lasted 60 minutes? Think of the scandal. Think of your father's heart condition." He patted my cheek twice, turned his back on me, and began unbuttoning his tuxedo shirt. Elena sat on the edge of our bridal bed, my bed, and began unzipping her heels, watching me with a smirk that told me she had been waiting for this moment for a long, long time. I stood there, a prisoner in 60 pounds of white silk. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but a strange, icy calm began to settle over my limbs. Mark thought he knew me. He thought I was the fragile socialite who would do anything to avoid a scene. He thought he had trapped me with the threat of my father's health and the weight of public humiliation. What he forgot was that before I was a wife, I was the daughter of a man who built a real estate empire by spotting a bad deal before the ink was even dry. And looking at Mark and Elena together, I realized I wasn't looking at a marriage. I was looking at a hostile takeover. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I looked at Mark's reflection in the mirror and forced my hands to stop shaking. "I see," I said, my voice remarkably steady. "I need a moment to process this. I'm going to go to the bathroom to get out of this dress." "Good girl," Mark said, not even looking up. "Don't be long. We have a flight to catch in the morning. All three of us." I gathered my train and walked into the massive marble bathroom, locking the door behind me. I didn't go to the mirror. I went straight to my bridal clutch sitting on the vanity. I pulled out my phone and my spare set of keys. Mark thought he had the upper hand because we signed the papers. He thought the prenup he'd pressured me to sign 3 days ago was his safety net. What he didn't know, what I had kept as a just in case because of a gut feeling I'd been too ashamed to admit, was that my father's lawyers had added a very specific infidelity and lifestyle morals clause in the final addendum, an addendum Mark signed without reading while he was distracted by a phone call from Elena. I took a deep breath, dialed a number I knew by heart, and waited. The phone rang twice before a gravelly, familiar voice picked up. "Claire? It's nearly midnight. Is everything okay at the reception?" "Julian," I whispered, my forehead pressed against the cold marble tile. "I need you to listen very carefully. I'm in the suite. Mark just brought Elena into our room. He told me she's moving in. He told me it's a lifestyle requirement." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Julian had been my father's head of legal for 30 years. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was the man who kept the empire's secrets. "The addendum, Claire. Did he sign the final binder on Tuesday?" "He did. I watched him. He was on a call with her the whole time, just scribbling his initials." "Then he just handed you the keys to his kingdom," Julian said, his voice dropping into a low, predatory hum. "That clause stipulates that any act of infidelity or moral turpitude within the first 72 hours of the marriage triggers an automatic annulment. More importantly, it activates a predatory marriage penalty. He loses the seed capital your father invested in his firm, and he forfeits the Kiowa property. But Claire, I need proof. If you walk out now, it's your word against theirs. They'll say you had a breakdown." "Proof," I repeated. My eyes landed on the small decorative shelf above the vanity. Tucked behind a jar of luxury bath salts was a small black device, a nanny cam I'd bought weeks ago when I noticed jewelry missing from my nightstand. I had thought it was a dishonest maid. Now I knew exactly who had been visiting our home. "I have a camera, Julian. It's recording right now. It's synced to my cloud." "Stay calm," Julian commanded. "Do not confront them. Do not let them know you're on to the legal side of this. Play the part of the humiliated wife for just a few more hours. I'm calling a private courier to secure the server logs. Stay in the room, Claire. Let them think they've won." I hung up. I stood there for a moment, looking at my reflection. My mascara hadn't even run. I looked terrifyingly composed. I reached up and slowly unzipped the rest of my dress, letting the white silk pool around my ankles. I stepped out of it, standing in my lace slip, and grabbed my silk robe. I opened the bathroom door. The lights in the bedroom had been dimmed. Mark was sitting in the armchair, his shirt open, a second glass of bourbon in his hand. Elena was sitting on the edge of the bed, spreading a thick layer of my expensive night cream onto my neck. my night cream in my bed. "Feeling better?" Mark asked, his eyes raking over me with a cold, possessive curiosity. "I realized I don't have much of a choice," I said. I walked over to the vanity, my movements slow and deliberate. I picked up my hairbrush and began brushing my hair, the bristles scraping against my scalp. "My father's heart, the scandal. You've thought this through, Mark." "I always think things through, Claire. It's why I'm successful. You provide the structure, Elena provides the passion. It's a modern arrangement. You'll get used to it. In 6 months, you'll wonder why you were ever upset." Elena looked at me through the mirror, a thin, triumphant smile on her face. "I can help you with the honeymoon packing, Claire. Mark says you always overpack. I'm much more efficient." "I'm sure you are," I replied. I turned to look at them both. "If we're doing this, I want one thing, a show of good faith. Mark, you mentioned the Kiowa house. You said it was for us. If Elena is moving in, I want the deed transferred into a joint trust tomorrow morning before we leave for the airport. I need to know I'm secure if I'm going to accept this." Mark laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Greedy. I like that. It proves you're finally thinking like a member of this family. Fine. I'll call the office in the morning. We'll have the papers drawn up by the time we land in Bora Bora." "Thank you," I said. I walked toward the bed. "Elena, you can have the left side. I prefer the right anyway." The look of shock on Elena's face was almost worth the agony in my chest. She had expected a fight. She had expected to be the wild one while I played the frigid wife. By inviting her into the space, I had stripped her of her power to provoke me. "I'm going to sleep in the sitting room," Mark said, standing up. He looked slightly unsettled now, as if my lack of a breakdown was confusing him. "You two, get acquainted." He left the room, closing the door behind him. Elena and I were left in the heavy silence of the suite. Elena stayed on the bed, her eyes darting around the room looking for a way to regain the upper hand. "You think you're so smart," she hissed, her voice dropping the assistant persona. "But he's been mine for years. This wedding, it was just a fundraiser for our future. He laughs at you. He mocks your little charity luncheons. He calls you the statue." I didn't flinch. I sat down in the armchair Mark had just vacated and crossed my legs. "Tell me more, Elena. If we're going to be family, I should know everything. When exactly did the two of you start planning this? Was it before or after he asked my father for the $10 million expansion loan?" She preened, leaning back against the pillows, my pillows. "Before. Way before. We even picked out your engagement ring together. I told him to go with the cushion cut. It looks better on people with thin fingers." She kept talking, fueled by her own ego and the need to humiliate me. She told me about the hotels, the trips I thought were business, the way they had laughed at my naivete over dinners paid for with my family's credit cards. She didn't realize she was speaking directly into a high-definition microphone hidden 3 feet away. She didn't realize that every word was a nail in the coffin of her lavish future. Around 3 a.m., she finally fell asleep, sprawled across the silk sheets. I didn't sleep. I sat in that chair, watching the sun begin to bleed over the Atlantic horizon, my phone vibrating in my lap with a single text from Julian. "Files received. The trap is set. Don't leave for the airport." At 6:30 a.m., Mark pounded on the bedroom door. He looked refreshed, already dressed in a casual linen suit perfect for a tropical getaway. He didn't even glance at me as he walked toward the bed to shake Elena awake. "Wake up, babe. The car will be here in 20 minutes, he said, his voice brimming with a terrifying kind of excitement. Then he turned to me. "Claire, why are you already dressed? And where's your suitcase?" I was wearing a charcoal Chanel suit, my hair pulled back into a sleek, tight knot. I looked like I was heading to a board meeting, not a honeymoon. "I sent my bags ahead," I said quietly, "with the driver." "Good. Efficient. I like that." Mark checked his Rolex. Julian called. He's downstairs in the hotel's private conference wing with the deed for the Kiowa house. We'll sign, then head straight to the tarmac. Elena, get moving. Elena scrambled out of bed, throwing on a wrap dress, her face puffy from sleep but her eyes still glittering with malice. We walked down to the lobby in a bizarre, silent procession. Mark walked in the middle, a king between his two queens, the one who provided his status and the one who provided his fun. When we entered the conference room, the atmosphere was frozen. My father was there, sitting at the head of the table. He looked older than he had at the ceremony, his face etched with a grim, stony disappointment. Julian sat next to him, a laptop open and a single sheet of paper in front of him. "Arthur," Mark said, forcing a jovial tone. "A bit early for a meeting, isn't it? But I appreciate you coming down to witness the deed transfer." My father didn't look at Mark. He looked at me. I nodded once. "Sit down, Mark," Julian said. His voice was like a sliding blade. Mark's smile faltered. He looked at Elena, then back at the table. He sat. Elena tried to sit in the chair next to him, but Julian held up a hand. "This is for the principals only, Elena. You can stand by the door." "What's this about? Where's the deed?" Julian pushed the laptop toward Mark and hit play. The audio was crystal clear. It was Elena's voice from 3 a.m. "He's been mine for years. This wedding? It was just a fundraiser for our future. He calls you the statue." Then came Mark's voice from earlier in the night. "I need variety. I need loyalty. Elena stays, you stay. That's the deal." Mark went gray. Not pale. Gray. He looked at the camera hidden in the corner of the laptop screen, then at me. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of Elena's sharp, ragged breathing by the door. "The addendum you signed on Tuesday," Julian said, "Section 14.4, the moral turpitude and predatory intent clause. By bringing a third party into the bridal suite for the purpose of establishing a multi-partner household without prior written consent, you have triggered a total breach of the marital contract." "It's a lifestyle choice," Mark stammered, his hands shaking. "You can't sue someone for a lifestyle choice." "We aren't suing you, Mark," my father said, speaking for the first time. His voice was low and dangerous. "We're executing the clawback. As of 5 minutes ago, the $10 million loan to your firm has been called in full due to the ethics violation clause. Since your firm's assets are collateralized against that loan, I now own 60% of your company. You're fired, Mark, effective immediately." Mark gasped, looking like a man drowning on dry land. "You can't! I'm your son-in-law!" "Actually," Julian said, sliding a new set of papers across the table, "you aren't. We've filed for an emergency annulment based on fraud. The marriage is being erased as if it never happened. You have no claim to Claire's assets, no claim to the Kiowa house, and no job." Elena moved then, stepping toward the table. "Mark? What is he saying? You said the house was ours." Mark turned on her, his face contorted with rage. "Shut up, Elena. Just shut up." I stood up. I didn't feel the triumph I expected. I just felt a profound sense of relief, like a heavy, suffocating veil had been lifted from my head. I walked over to Mark. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading, looking for the soft woman he thought he had married. "You called me the statue, Mark, but you forgot one thing about statues. They're made of stone, and they don't break just because you decide to step on them." I slipped the 5-carat diamond off my finger. It felt light. I placed it on the table in front of him. "The car is outside, but it's not going to the airport. It's going to your apartment. I've already had the locks changed at the house. Your things are in the driveway. I'd suggest you and Elena start looking for a studio apartment. I hear they're much more efficient." I turned and walked out of the room. My father followed me, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. We walked through the lobby, past the beautiful floral arrangements from the night before, and out into the bright, crisp morning air. I didn't look back to see Mark and Elena screaming at each other in the hallway. I didn't look back at the life I thought I wanted. I got in the car, looked at the ocean, and for the first time in 3 years, I breathed. The statue was finally free. Every story we share here is a piece of a lived truth, finally whispered out loud. If today's journey resonated with you, please subscribe to Quiet Drama Stories and leave a like. Also, share your thoughts in the comment section. Your support ensures that these quiet voices are finally heard. Thank you for listening. And remember, you are never as alone as you feel. See you in the next story.